So let's apply this to safety. Another kind of identified bias is called availability bias. And the way that that works is you tend to make decisions on the basis of the information most available to you. So if I ask you, in your county, is the suicide rate the highest or the homicide rate? Most of you will say the homicide rate is the highest. And the reason is because that information is available to you through the media. You hear about it all the time. And so it seems like it's higher. It actually isn't higher. Actually, the suicide rate is higher, probably double. So you see that example of availability bias. Now, do we do that in safety, that kind of thing? An example is something called the accident cycle or the injury cycle. When injury frequency climbs to a certain point, there's a threshold at which, if you go above that threshold, psychological threshold, the organization responds with action. They say, wait a minute, we're having too many injuries, we've got to do something about this, and they create a bunch of action, a lot of stuff goes in motion, a lot of work gets done, and over time the injury rate comes down and down and down, and then there's a lower threshold at which people say, well, we're doing pretty well, and the attention shifts. That's the availability bias, overvaluing the most recent information that you have received. Another example is the Columbia Space Shuttle failure, where it's clear that a series of decisions led up to and enabled the incident. Call it boiled frog syndrome, where the frog, if the water is heated up slowly, the frog doesn't jump out. If it's hot water, the frog jumps out. Similarly, the first time a decision is made to fly that doesn't fit the criteria, it's a deviation that people understand and think is probably not the right thing to do. Maybe they do it anyway, but then over time, that deviation becomes normalized. It becomes something that we're all comfortable with over time. Cognitive bias underlies most of the suboptimal decisions that people make when it comes to safety, because they're all about probability. You're always estimating probabilities when you make safe decisions. If the way you think about probabilities is flawed, if you're inclined to biases, and we are, human beings are, that's Kahneman's finding, then unless you're aware of these biases, and unless you train yourself on how to respond in the proper way to a situation, you will make probability judgment mistakes, and that will influence the safety outcomes that you have.